Hi, my name is Kevin, and I am a organizer of the GDD Cloud Copenhagen. And I gave this workshop yesterday, and I want to give it the same now. I want to show you how you can do continuous deployment with Cloud Run and Cloud Build. It's Cloud Build and Cloud Run is two amazing products from Google Cloud, and Cloud Run is actually just now getting general available. But the cool thing is, like, these products are super simple individually, but putting them together can be a little bit tricky because Google Cloud is a platform that really caters for everyone's needs, and therefore there are some security stuff. But in this demo, I will show you how you can get started with Google Cloud and Cloud Run using any computer. It doesn't matter if you're on Mac or Windows or Chrome OS. And in the end, we will have a website where on GitHub you can make a commit and see it live building with Docker in just around 40 seconds. So that's pretty cool. So first off, I will maybe just show you a little bit about Google Cloud, how it looks. So I will switch to my screen here. So you can see here I created a new project here called Kevin Awesome Project. You can create a new project here by clicking New Project if you want to do so. I recommend creating new projects always because it's just much easier to separate if you're trying out something new. You can always delete it later on. So what I want to do now is we need to test and build our application first. And Google Cloud actually has this really cool, awesome called Cloud Shell. And Cloud Shell is this where Google actually gives you a micro instance. So by just clicking on this, they will actually spin up a small instance for you where you can do all kinds of stuff. Like, it's basically a machine that you're not paying for it, which is pretty cool. But you have access to all the cloud products through that shell. So now we have it ready, and you can see this is just a normal shell, and we can just expand a little bit here if I can pull it up. And we can see here we have gcloud, the command line. So this basically allows us to do anything from just a web browser. But Google Cloud also has this Cloud Shell editor. So you can if you click here, Launch Editor, it actually opens up and where you have all your projects here in the side. So if you make it a little bit smaller, you can see here I have a lot of different projects over the side. But we're going to do some of the things through the terminal down here. So this takes a little bit a while to load, but while we're doing that, we can begin to make our new project down here in the editor. Because what we're going to do is make a folder the similar way that what our project is called, and that's just where we're going to store all our source code files. So we call that Kevin Awesome Project. And we can then change the directory into that Kevin Awesome Project. So here, what we need, we're going to build a Node.js application. It could be any application, but in this example, I just have a lot of experience with Node.js. But you can follow the project if you don't know Node.js. It's pretty simple. But we're going to need a server.js, which is pretty normal in Node.js, and we can say touch, which basically then creates the file, an empty one. Cloud Shell has this built in where you can say Cloud Shell edit server.js. And here it will basically pop up and open it here. And this editor is now ready where you can we don't even have to save it, also save whenever we are finished typing. So a basic Node.js server looks like this. It's called, we just need to load first not this, we need to require HTTP. Oh, that's a little bit tricky. What? Require. And we need to require the HTTP module. Then we can create a server here, say http.create server. And this takes request and response. And here we say send end here, res end. And we can say hello, awesome. And also, just for good measure, we want to say console log, just so we have something we can see whenever we get a new connection. So this is and then we need to listen on a port. This is actually one of the only thing that is a requirement for how to use Cloud Run, is that you need to listen on the port that is coming from the environment. And you can do that by say process.env.port, or if it's undefined, we will just say we will listen on 8080. Then we will say server.listen, listen on that port, and then we can give it a callback that will basically run whenever it is listening. So we can say here listening. This will just tell us like that server started correctly and is actually listening on the port. So save this file and we can test it down here. Say server.js. I think this is some of the things. It's really important to continuously test this so that you are none of the points you're basically trying to get something running on Cloud Run that you haven't tested before. Google Cloud has another cool feature where you can actually get access to this Cloud Shell through the interface. So if you click here web preview, you can see preview on port 8080. And what that would do is it would open a web browser and actually proxy the connection into this container you have running on your micro instance. You can see hello, awesome. So we know that works. So we can switch back here and see Control C and stop that. What we need now is a Docker file. And a Docker file is so we can describe how we're going to, what dependencies our application has and how we're going to package our application. And that is called just Docker file, and we can touch it and we can say Cloud Shell edit Docker file again, and then we will see it up here. We could also edit it in Vim or Nano if you know that, but I think this is a cool way for everyone to get started on Docker or Google Cloud. So we can see here from Node, and we want to say 13, which is a later one, and Slim. Then we will take all define a work dir, because this defines where all our commands inside the container will be run. By default, if we don't define it, it will run inside the root folder because the default user is root. That's a lot about Docker, but that's just some details. There's a lot of information you can find on Docker's documentation about this. Then we need to add all our files into the app folder, and then we need to define what is our start command, and that is node server. So this basically explains our container, how we're going to run this. And we can test it out by saying here docker build -t. We need to give it a name, the tag, and we can say awesome project. And then once we stand inside the folder, we can just say dot, and Docker would already know the context where to take all the files and also how to find the Docker file. So we build it here, and it should build in a little under a minute. So here you can see building, it's pulling the image, slim version, and you can see it's downloading really fast. It's actually downloading faster than it's extracting, because actually on this machine we are connected directly on the internet, which is super fast. So it's also a good way to save bandwidth if you are in a place where you don't have a fast internet connection to pull down Docker images. So here we can try to run it again. We can say docker run it to interactive to see the terminal. Then we can say P for port. We want to expose 8080 again and 8080 inside the container. And then we want to say awesome project, which is the name of our container that we just defined. Now we can see here it says listening again, and we can try it out and see if it works still. And our container says hello, awesome, and we can go back and we can see we've got 2 new connections. And the reason, just a small fact, the reason why we got 2 new connections is because by default the browser will try to fetch the favy icon also. Small fact. So we now have a proper application, have a Docker file that explains like how our application is going to run, and we can now go on the next step. So here we actually have to do a couple of things, but I want to show you how you can do this with GitHub, because a lot of developers use GitHub, and GitHub is super cool. We could deploy to Cloud Run from here, but it wouldn't be that workflow you would normally have. So I actually recommend that we go now to GitHub, create a repository so we can link it together with Cloud Build later on. So with that, I will just show you here. Let's go to here, GitHub, create just github.com. We can go here and say new repository, create a new one, and it will be here, Kevin awesome project. And it's fine if it's just public, and this is also fine. So here we have an empty one. And what we can basically just do is we can copy basically the files from, I don't condone this is not how you do probably, but we just need to do it fast. So let's just do that again. So here we have to say Dockerfile, and we can go here in and copy the Dockerfile. Say commit, and we need to create a new file as well, server.js, and we can copy that from here. And we basically now have a GitHub project with 2 files where we are ready to do continuous integration. Because the continuous integration is that for each time we commit, each time we make a change, we're automatically testing that this whole thing works without having to do anything manual actions. This is important because once you have to do something manually, you are much more likely to actually make a change and forget to test it, because you have to test it manually. So that's why we have to continuously test it. So what we now need to do is we need to go to something called Cloud Build. And Cloud Build we can configure to connect to GitHub and automatically build our repository whenever we get a change. So you could find it over here in the build, and it would be down here under tools, so Cloud Build. But one thing I like is always you can say shift slash, and then you can search for it. This is often much quicker if you have to switch between products. So this is what you see first time when you open a new project. You basically have to click enable Cloud Build API, and it will add this correct service account. And the reason why they're not enabled by default, you can say, is because Google has a lot of projects, and if they were all enabled, they will both take a lot of service accounts, which is for permissions. So it would be unnecessary because not all projects need it. But now we enable it, and now it will work. So now we just need to go to triggers, and we can say connect a repository. Google has now these GitHub Cloud Build GitHub app. This is probably their preferred, but it's still in beta, and I have experienced some problems. So I still recommend going with the GitHub mirrored because it's just easier to use what I already know, and this has been working for quite some time. So you say that continue. Then you need to, if you're not already authenticated with GitHub, it would show you authenticate with GitHub, like an OAuth. But you can see here I'm already authenticated, so we will just switch straight to it. And here I can say awesome project, search for my one, and I have a little bit more than 100 repositories, so that's why my latest one is not showing up. Here you can see it showed up because I searched for it, and I can select it now. So Kevin awesome project, connect repository. And I can now, after this, basically what Google will do is it will set up a webhook and also give itself an SSH key so it can clone the project. So with now this, we can add a trigger. So every time now where Google sees a commit, gets a webhook, it will run what we do here. And this is by default normally good enough if you're just starting out. This is here you can say when should it run this, but by default we just want to run everything whenever everything changes. And the interesting part is here the build configuration. So the build configuration is whether we want a Docker file or Cloud Build. The cool thing with Cloud Build is that we can basically be a little bit progressive in that we started very simple, and then we will be more and more advanced, and this is super awesome. So by default we just go with Dockerfile, super simple, and we will say this in the root, it's called Dockerfile. And here I will just make the name a little bit shorter so it's a little bit easier to type and see. But the first one is mandatory. It has to say Kevin Awesome Project because that is our Google Cloud Project ID. So we can say create trigger, and also just to mention, short char will be replaced by 8 of the first characters of our GitHub hash or GitHub char, git char. So we say create trigger, and because we haven't committed, we can make the first time we can say run trigger, and if it only sees there's one branch, it will automatically start on master. So you can click show here, and you will see that our build has now started. It's cloning the repository, it's building our Docker image. You can click this here, show news, then you don't need to scroll. You will basically show it, the newest one up the top. It's pretty cool. And you can see now it actually finished successfully, and it's now pushing it to GCR, which is Google Container Registry. So this is super cool. We are nearly ready to deploy our first cloud run. So it's green. It's very important to check that, and it only took 32 seconds, and the majority of the time was spent like pulling and pushing. So there's not much to improve there. So let's go to Cloud Run, and instead of just clicking it, let's search for it instead. So here, Cloud Run. So this also needs to be enabled, and we just say start using Cloud Run. Then it was pretty quick enabled. Sometimes this will take 1 minute or 2 minutes, but you can see when it is enabled down here. Then we will click create service, and you can see Cloud Run has been enabled. Normally it takes a few minutes, and you can see that's why it redirected us back. Create service again, and we should see a screen where you can select. We can now select our container image, and right now we only have one, and you can click here and say this one. And this is actually the unique char of the image, and this is our GitHub, or not our GitHub, but our Git char. This is just the container char. There's some details, but this is if you're looking for something you already seen. So here we can select, and I am in Europe, so I want to close me, and we have to say allow authenticated, unauthenticated invocations. And this is because you can both use Cloud Run for inter-services, like microservices to microservices, but if you want to allow users that just use a web browser, it has to be unauthenticated, because by default their request would just come by them typing in the URL. So that is all we need, and we can just say create. So this is super awesome. Now we're basically using Cloud Run, and Cloud Run is actually a super cool project. It's a project that is built on top of a lot of open source projects, and so in fact, if you wanted to deploy it yourself, you could do that. So while this builds, it takes around a couple of minutes. I will just explain you a little bit about Cloud Run. Cloud Run is basically the hosted version of a open source project called Knative, and Knative is a project that runs on top of Istio, and Istio is a service mesh and that runs on top of Kubernetes. It's pretty amazing because this open source software means that you can actually deploy Knative yourself if you wanted to, and actually get the same experience. But of course, it's not as easy to deploy all this software, so that's why like Google is helping you by doing it for you. But the cool thing is like you are not locked in. If you wanted, you could deploy this if you wanted, and not like other serverless projects where you're basically locked into the platform because you have no way of like taking it and deploying the same software yourself. But you can see now it's actually deployed. It's green, and we can now click this URL and see if it works. So it says hello awesome, and that's just perfect because we are now running our container, and we can refresh and see it again. And to check out some of the details about like Cloud Run, we can go to logs, for example, and see that our container will actually have like started and our new containers. And even more cool is like this Cloud Run is actually all built on top of Stackdriver and all this dumb stuff. So if you click here, you would actually go to Stackdriver, the whole logging viewer, and the same here with the metrics is from Stackdriver, and they will be available once you have a little more traffic. So this is super cool. So now we have continuous integration with Cloud Build, but we haven't combined those projects now. So what we need to do is now we need to make Cloud Build automatically deploy whenever we make a change. So that's a few things we need to do. First off, we need to go and change our Cloud Build to use cloudbuild.yaml. So let's go back here on the triggers. We're going to change our trigger, and over here we can say edit. Then we can scroll down and change build configuration. Instead of Dockerfile, we're going to choose a Cloud Build. So this Cloud Build is basically our own steps that we want to define for what steps you want to run. So there's a few steps we want to run. We want to say Docker build, and we want to say Docker push. This is exactly the same that we just have over here, but we need to define it because we need to define a third step, which is gcloud beta run deploy. So we can save this, and it doesn't change anything. Now it just listens on cloudbuild.yaml. Then we can go to our GitHub project. But let's first search for cloudbuild.yaml, because that helps us, because we can just copy the YAML a little bit here, because it helps us kickstart it a little bit. The one that you can take here is this, because normally you can write this yourself, but there's not really a need to learn this by hand or by memory, because you wouldn't need to do that always. So here we basically have a few steps. The first step, I will just explain here what we have. So we have a few steps, and a Cloud Build basically contains so many steps, and the name is the name of the container that you want to run your step in, because each step is a Docker container where you can run some commands inside. And the first one here is called Cloud Builders and Docker. And Cloud Builders, the reason why you would use those, because they're already cached, and they're very quick to fetch, because they are often already there on the machine. So we want to run Docker, and we want to build our container, and we want to run the same project in our name, which is our project ID is here. It's called Kevin Awesome Project. And let me just see what was our container name. We can go in and look for that. So we can use the same, and it was this one here. We can copy that, and I called it the same as the project. That's really good. Let me just edit this. So it's called Kevin Awesome Project, which is the project, and also the ID. And we have here, we need to define a name that's unique, which would be the short char. So here we can say short char, which is something that Cloud Build will replace for us with our 8 characters. So this looks correct, and then we want to also include another step, which is going to do Docker push. So we're going to change it to push, and then push the image to Google Container Registry, and also delete the dot at the end. Oh, you cannot see this. So here you can see short char. We're basically doing push in the end. So we can commit this file, and we will now see that Cloud Build has picked up now again. We can say refresh, and we will have a new build started with our Cloud Build YAML. So now we have 2 steps, and it was defined in our own file. So you can see here step 1 is this one, and it's building now, and step 2 would be pushing. So this is all good, and that went really well. It only took 23 seconds, even quicker. That's amazing. And we can now actually try to deploy this container. So let's take this image and deploy it from the command line, because that's actually what we can do. So let's start our terminal here, and we're going to basically make cloud build run the same commands as we are running. So we can say gcloud, and we're going to say beta run, even though it's still generally available. Now you're using beta tag because there's still some features we need. And we can say beta run, and you want list. You want to see revisions, run services list. Yes, it's always helpful when they want to show you a little bit what is going on. I want to say fully managed. We can see here, I just want to see our service name, a little bit bigger here. Our service name, it's called Kevin Awesome Project. So here we want to say, just make it a little bit easier to read. We want to deploy this new Docker image. So we have this image here, and we can say gcloud beta run deploy, and there's a few arguments we need to deploy. First, need the name, and the name we had Kevin Awesome Project. We can then say here region, because it still need to also have the region. It can be a little bit annoying because you just think you could just guess it, but you can, I think you can have you can deploy to multiple regions, and that's why it needs to know upfront, even though you have defined it when you created it. So it's called Europe West 1, and we also need to say which platform it is, because Cloud Run can now run on multiple platforms, so we need to say Cloud Run, platform equal managed, and then lastly we say image equal the new one. So with this command, gcloud beta run deploy, our service name, the region, platform, and image. Press enter, and we will actually see now that with this command we can deploy a new version of our Cloud Run easily. And it created a new revision, and is now routing all the new traffic to this one. Cool. So to do continuous deployment, we need to take this command and make it run from Cloud Build. Easier said than done, but let's try to do it. Let's just copy this command, and let's go to GitHub. Let's go and change our Cloud Build. Let's go and edit here, and let's go and paste it in the end here, so we have it. And let's copy this step. We want to add this step here at the end, and we want to say gcloud. You can go and actually find these cloud builders if you Google it. They are in a GitHub project, and you can find it. They have a few of them, but one of them is gcloud. So we can remove the first one here, and then we want to add this inside here, inside the array. So we want to add single quotes around them all and commas, because it's actually in an array. So beta run deploy, and the reason why we're doing this is because of some way to parse it and bash. So we will basically do this between all of them, and also the platform. And lastly, here the image, and we now have our whole string encapsulated. So beta run deploy, our project, our service ID, the region, the platform manage, and the image. And we need to replace this as the line above with the short char, and we can commit this. So this will actually work. It will deploy our service automatically every time these two previous steps has been successful. So let's commit this and go to Cloud Build and see our new build has started. So we can see here, it will basically, we don't need this anymore. So it will begin to pull and build in the Docker container. And pushing. But our second step fails. So what happened? I already knew that it would fail, because it's a step that is easy to overlook. So I wanted to show you what actually happens. It says here, permission denied, the call does not have permissions. What that actually means is because Cloud Build is trying to run Cloud Run commands, and it doesn't have access to that by default. So by default, the Cloud Run agent doesn't have access to do a lot of stuff inside your project. You actually have to give it permission to deploy Cloud Run for you. This is super good, but it's also a little bit complicated. It's good because it keeps separating. It doesn't give you are not leaking permissions, or you actually have control over who has access to what and why. But normally that would have been a long step, but they actually improved that. So you can go to settings, and you can go here to Cloud Run, and you can say enable it. So what this does is that it gives the Cloud Build service account access to Cloud Run, and you can click enable it, and you will say here additional step may be required. And this is not what I decided, but on Google Cloud you need to grant a service account permissions to also take the role as other service accounts, because normally it would be a user that would have the permissions, but you can grant it access to that by just saying grant. And what we can do is then go back, retry it, and you should see it actually working. So this should work, and it will work, but let's just do some fun and make it a little bit quicker. Let's go and say here server.js, go and edit this, and we can say hello awesome. Now with continue deployment, just so we can see we actually made a change. Commit this file. We can go to Cloud Build and see it would actually also build this one. Both of them have started. And let's see how long this will take. We are building. We are pushing now, and we are now deploying container. And this also depends on how big your container is. The smaller it is, the quicker it is to deploy. Our container, I don't know, it's pretty small. We use the slim version, but obviously if you have a really large container, this takes longer. And now we can take this URL and see it in our hello awesome, now with continuous deployment. Yay! Because this is super awesome. Like now we can basically go on GitHub. It will ultimately test our Docker container if it can build, and it would ultimately deploy it. So we can now share this with anybody. You can also go here and like this URL looks a little bit weird, but you can go to Cloud Run, and then add your own domain. So if you click here, you can easily add a new domain with just DNS records. So this is so awesome. Like you are basically having the full power of the Google Cloud Platform at the same time that you're doing something really easily, really cheaply, because this will not cost you anything to run. You only pay per request and how long the container runs, and you get 2 million requests for free and 300,000 gigabyte seconds. So it's small enough for your side projects, or even if you're a small startup. So super awesome. And this is so important to set up, because you're basically saving time, and you're also allowing yourself to continue to integrate it, continuous testing it, and continuous deploying it and getting it out to customers. So that was just all I want to show you. I hope you will ask comments if you have any questions. Ask in the comments or send me an email. I will be sure to answer everyone. So thank you all, and that was basically it. Hey, have a good day.